come to this meeting, and thank you very much for the invite and making time for the meeting, is that as of legally we still have a week, but as of beginning of April, we've been instructed by central government to start applying the new guidance that's coming through as a result of the new domestic abuse bill. So I thought to come today to explain a bit about what those changes are, but also explain to you what are the opportunities that are happening currently in Stockport and how we can support each other to meet the need of our service users a bit better, as there are opportunities to make those changes happen at the moment. So unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to see the comments putting on the chat section as I'm going ahead. So feel free to give me a shout and ask your questions anytime you need to.
No problem, Naz. I'll keep an eye on the chat for
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. So domestic abuse bill actually comes in two different sections. There is a section of it that it's about the legal framework that's changing. So there are new legal definitions that are going to be added to the existing definition of domestic abuse. They're all intended to give better rights to victims. And there are sections of it that it's about how we're going to implement engaging perpetrators into what they call a positive engagement notice, to include them into taking an active action to change their behavior, change their circumstances, attend their needs. But the second part of it, which is about the perpetrators, is going to be a rollout over two years period. We still don't know who's going to start it yet. There is a strong possibility that Greater Manchester Police will be one of those starting forces. But that is the only element of it, that it's timetabled for a 2 years rollout period to kind of explore to see how the existing domestic abuse prevention notice are going to change gradually to include the positive engagement notice. And then there is another part to it, which is MHCLG, which is Ministry of Housing, Community and Local Government, which that is directly linked to the new duties that the local authorities have to provide and have to take on board in relation to safe housing scheme for the victims and providing support to the victims while they are in those provisions. So the changes to the legal definition is that we are going to have the first ever statutory definition of domestic abuse. Previously, domestic abuse was linked into the other statutory definitions, but now it's going to be on its own. And an important emphasis to the new definition is recognition of coercive control, which is slightly different about controlling someone. It's very systematic. It's got specific facets around it. And actually what we identified even locally in Stockport, a lot of homicides that we have, coercive control heavily really underpins those issues. And there are coercive control by nature is designed not to be noticed. So quite a lot of people who experience that are not known to services, or especially domestic abuse services. There is a strong focus on post-separation abuse. And one of the new definitions, which is economic abuse, is coming under that. It's about how having joint mortgage, joint loans, joint financial commitments is going to play a role after separation in dynamics of abuse. That's a new definitions coming through. And also there are some criteria that have been updated to give better clarity to us. One of them is actually the age of the victims. Now, at the moment, anybody who's experiencing domestic abuse under the age of 16, they still need to be dealt with as child protection services. If it's anybody 16 and over, will be domestic abuse victims and domestic abuse perpetrators. One of the other clarification areas is that people need to be related or have been related at some point of their life. So if somebody is somebody's ex from 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and exhibits those relationship dynamics, it still will be classed as victim and perpetrator. that's been clarified. And the other one, which I think it's a very useful way of looking at domestic abuse, is actually introducing intimate partner violence, which is about husbands and wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, intimate partners, whether they're current or the previous one, and introducing the adult family violence abuse as a different definition, because it suggests that it drives from different dynamics. It needs different research, it needs different type of risk assessment, and because everything is being classed under one category, that area, adult family violence, which is violence of adult children to the brothers, sisters, or mom and dad, grandparents, are underdeveloped. So this is an area that's quite hopeful for us to start looking at it, that it's in its own right. The other area which I'm personally really excited about, and I think that's really, really important to consider, is that we are going to support children a bit differently. Children up until now, if they were subjected to direct abuse, they were going through child protection process, and if they were witnessing abuse, sometimes they had some level of interventions, but generally not much. So within the new DA bill, children are going to be victims in their own rights. So regardless of if they witness abuse or not, regardless of if they've experienced direct abuse or not, if they are cared for parents who've experienced domestic abuse or perpetrated domestic abuse, they will be regarded as victims in their own rights. So that's a really important point for us to consider about how we support. And for me personally, there's an area that I'm working with, YAS, for example, our strategies, violence against women and girls, we tend to not focus on boys enough. And boys tend to kind of exhibit their trauma slightly differently. So we're working really with young offenders team to think about how do we need to support boys kind of being classed as victims as we go forward, because that's also really important from a young age to consider that. So as part of this process, MHCLG, which is part of the government, initially gave us 50 grand capacity building fund, which the capacity building fund is the funding that we've been instructed to utilize to develop an assessment framework of the needs of Stockport. And that's an area that I really want you to kind of ponder about how you could contribute towards it. Because even though I worked in the sector for billions of years and I know the need of Stockport, we need to reflect those needs in the assessment process that's going to be conducted by somebody that's meeting with lots of different people, which as I go ahead, I explain to you. It's part of it is going to be used for workforce development. We talked to Joe last week, Nuala, my manager, and I, to say we really want to offer any kind of support and training the voluntary sector needs from us. The training will be offered for free. The training will be written in the way that you want it to be written. If you want to access existing training, please let us know. And it's about really trying to give everybody the confidence they need in order to be able to do that and speak up on behalf of their clients. We're going to facilitate different workshops. We need to do some awareness raising. We need to let the community know that the definition of change, we need to let them know about the new housing rights. So some of that is going to be utilized for that. And it's also about monitoring implementation. We are instructed to be more transparent. There is more discussion about actually we need to map the funding we spend in different areas of domestic abuse and how we're going to communicate that. So the capacity building fund is around the structure that holds this process as we go forward. Then there are certain qualities that MHCLG is asking from us to incorporate in the work as we go forward, which we need to increase engagement with all our key partners. We need to clearly map all the services that are available. And we need to actually review all our pathways. I've already started talking to some of the groups. Diana, my colleague, is talking to quite a lot of groups. She's independent from us. And some very interesting themes are going through. For example, a lot of people know something isn't right, but they don't know is domestic abuse. So it really made us think about what other vocabulary and narratives we need to use when we talk to people, because domestic abuse as a label might alienate quite a lot of people. So it's interesting to see similar themes are coming through. And then we have the first priority that's been set out for us by the central government, which is to form a multi-agency domestic abuse local partnership board. Within that, we need to, we've already had a pre-discussion about it to see if we have any existing group that could slightly change to become that platform, because everybody is kind of really, really busy and we can't ask people to attend multiple groups. So we did have a multi-agency steering group. We thought that if we actually change the structure of that group to incorporate what we need to have in order to multi-agency domestic abuse board partnership board take place, we can go forward with that. We will are in agreement that that's a possibility. The board needs to have representation from lots of different partners and lots of different groups, statutory services, and a big emphasis on really voluntary organizations and charities to have the voice and the voice of their client groups heard within those areas. The purpose of the board is to observe and monitor the need for accommodation-based domestic abuse support for all victims in our areas. And as you know, in domestic abuse, people sometimes move away from the area they're at. So residents from Stockport might be going to other areas of Greater Manchester and North West and vice versa. So we need to actually accommodate them and develop ways to accommodate the need of other services. Analyze and scale the nature of DA needs in our area, which that's interesting. We kind of, again, as I said, themes are coming through. And an area that we need to look into is the highly specialized services throughout the whole process, the need of people with disability, people who are no recourse to public fund, asylum seekers with this status that it's not clear yet, they don't have access to public recourse as part of it, the need of ethnic minority groups, the need of LGBTQ communities. So it's a lot of discussions about understanding the barriers into specialized group accessing domestic abuse services. We need to develop and publish a strategy, which last year was the year that we had to develop and publish the strategy. We did the strategy in consultation with few meetings that we had with people, with our partners. However, what we decided to do is, as part of the consultation, my colleague Diana will share the strategy with people, and we need to actually demonstrate that the strategy is what people want and what people identified as their needs. And we have to develop an action plan associated with that strategy in order to demonstrate to people, these are the actions. It's for accountability. These are the actions you asked us to do, and this is what we've done about it, and actually share what was successful and what wasn't. We need to monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of the base strategy. So as part of that, I'll be meeting with everybody on a regular basis. I really want to hear from what is not working. You know, a couple of really amazing services that we developed in terms of responding to community needs in Brunington, and what we're doing in Lancashire Hill. Part of the work that we're doing in Reddish is really resulted as us noticing that it's not working what we think it should work. So really was a response to community telling us why they don't like to engage with services, and we design services that was meaningful for the community. So it's really important to tell us what's not working. And then we need to really give effect to the strategy. It's really important for us to kind of say, are we really doing what we said we were going to do? Then we have a reporting system to report back to central government. And then something else that is new that's not here is actually the role of Domestic Abuse Commissioner, that she is going to, as an independent person, oversee what we do and be in agreement that what we do in the frame of our work is fitting within the good practice guidelines for domestic abuse service provision. So in terms of scoping and mapping DA services, we need to assess the scale of the need for our area. I mean, it's no surprise, you all know that Stockport local authorities spending on domestic abuse up until now, especially in comparison to the other areas, have been quite thin, the layer of spending in domestic abuse. And we are really lucky to have amazing voluntary sectors who really try to kind of bring more funding into the area to be able to meet the need of the services. So my manager, Nuala, again, she's really resourceful. She managed to secure us quite a bit of funding to kind of develop IDVA services. When I joined Stockport 4 years ago, we had only one IDVA in post. Now we have 5.5. We have specialist IDVAs. So we kind of are building up on that. But they are a group of clients that we're aware that domestic abuse is happening within those communities, but we don't see them coming through. So we really need to realistically understand what is the need. We need to actively look into the housing demand data. So I've already started working with Stockport Housing Group, with some of our social landlords, and some of the victims to share with us the barriers they experienced about having suitable housing. So we need to understand the need, the gaps, what's available, what's not available, and also refuge access in the area. And as part of that, we need to collect case studies of what worked, but also what didn't work, and what lessons we're learning about what we've been doing up to now. There are 4 areas for us to explore. What individuals who are part of the community identify as their needs, what is considered to be a barrier to a meaningful support. And I really don't like the support to be something that us as professionals set for people per se, because what we sell needs to make sense in the life of our clients who need that service. So meaningful support is really, from client point of view, I think is really, really important for us to understand. But also non-DA specialists are in a very important place to tell the specialist DA services about what is not currently happening. And we need to really collect that. It's part of the requirement that's expected from us. We need to evidence how we gathered this information and commission services. So please be involved as much as you can. And then what needs are not being met by the providers at the moment. I already know a few of them, but I'll be really happy to hear more about that. And does the identified need fit with our strategy? Because if we do the assessment and we find out there are sections in our strategy that we got wrong, we need to amend it. The strategy needs to be a reflection of the needs. So the needs assessment needs to follow the survivor's experience, the experience of small specialist and non-specialist service providers, whether they're commissioned or not commissioned. We know a lot of work happening in Stockport, and people either source different type of funding or they're not commissioned. So we really want to hear from everybody. We need to do qualitative and quantitative research. We need to get information from health sector. Those collect lots of different information. We need to understand the demographic of the population. And then we need to evidence, again, collect the evidence we collect from homicides. I don't know whether you're aware or not. Up until before the pandemic, we had maybe 1 or maximum 2 homicides, domestic homicides in Stockport. This year, I think we had our 4th. And I think the 5th one, we're still waiting to see if we're meeting the criteria for it to go forward. So it's really important for us to actually consider that, consider all the reports that are coming through, all the domestic violence, homicide and honor-based violence information that are coming through. We need to really collect our learning from last few years as well. Then again, something that I hear a lot from our colleagues is about the pathways to domestic abuse services are difficult, not accessible. But I would also like to hear what will make it easier for us to work. There's especially huge barriers for LGBTQ men, no recourse to public fund victims, ethnic minority and young victims to access services. So these are in areas that our database and our anecdotal knowledge suggests to us that people tend to go to charities or organizations in the voluntary sector when there's specialists to their area of need and then talk about DA. So they don't come directly to DA. So it's about us trying to understand how best we can support you to support them or support you to connect them into our services. And then we need to understand which services are well aligned to the need of our clients, and maybe we can model that, maybe we can explore that better. And then we need to think about, again, how we need to change our service delivery to meet the diversity of need of our clients. For example, an area which I think we need to really focus on in working with adult social care is that a lot of older population who are receiving pension, because pension is considered as an income, don't qualify to go to refuges because they have to pay, and paying for refuge is very expensive. And I think really safety shouldn't be compromised in those cases. And it's about us really collecting the voice of our clients to think about, how we can actually provide the safety support that people could have had in a refuge and other provisions they're at. And they might very well choose to stay in their home. Maybe moving from their home is not really the best option for them. So it's about really educating us in how to use the resources given to us to meet the need of your clients. We need to demonstrate the evidence of our responsive commissioning. So that's an area I feel ethically really committed to. I think you really need to understand how we make those decisions to fund services. And it's about our responsibility to us and to our community really to be really open and transparent about it, and explain sometimes some decisions, the difficult decisions we need to make. But we need to be open about how we came to those decisions and what is the consequences of that long term and short term. We need to cross-reference everything based on the Equality Act and make sure we considered everybody's need around that. And we need to map the cost of the services, what we currently are spending, and what we're going to spend in that area, which is all based on the assessments we do, the guidance we have, and the budgets that's been given to us. So there are a couple of information that I like to share with you. One is that the funding that's given to us by MHCLG is specifically focused around people who are in safe accommodation. Now, safe accommodation doesn't mean refuge. Safe accommodation essentially could be interpreted as anybody who chooses not to live with the perpetrator anymore. If we applied target hardening measures for people's home, which means changing their locks, making their letterbox fireproof, that type of work that we could do, the house could be eligible to having that level of support. And it's about really for us to think about, what do you think your stakeholders, your clients, your service users need in order for us to deliver the new definition for them? I'm really open to hear from all of you about what you need. I'll put my email in the chat if you want to email me separately, or you might already know about what your clients needed. And I'm really open to anything that you want to ask me about the bill. I follow it religiously. So if you want to know a bit more about what exactly is changing about victims, I'll be happy to explain that. Any questions, just throw it.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Naz. There's a few things actually in the chat, so I'll share them. Tina said, yes, especially important for young boys. I got that further up. Paula's here. She's having a few problems with the sound, but I've said we've got the recording, so presumably if she's got any questions, Paula, you can put them in the chat. Meg has said, we're a CIC and happy to come involved in the partnership board. Who should we contact? So maybe that's good for people to know if they are interested in being a part of whatever working group you're creating. Is there any criteria, and what do they need to do next?
I am putting my email in the chat box. Email me, because that meeting traditionally used to be chaired by somebody from Greater Manchester Police, Gina. However, she's going to a different role and somebody new is taking over. We're meeting with him tomorrow afternoon with Nuala, which my manager, Nuala, possibly she'll be chairing those meetings. And there are two levels of instructions by MHCLG. One is to say either people can directly be involved in the meetings. There are some expectation in terms of gathering data and reporting. Some people may not want to do that. I feel very strongly about capturing the voice of the victims and the children to be fed into those meetings, either directly or indirectly. So I'm really attuned into actually having an additional meeting when we can collect all the voices. So at this moment, we are kind of like exploring to see how we need to form this group. We just had our first initial meeting to say, is our current steering group good enough to be changed, to be transferred into the board meeting? We are working on it. We are having lots of meetings in next 2 weeks. So I'm going to put my meeting in the chat. Please email me if you're interested to be part of that. We really want you to be part of that. And I'll invite you into the next meetings as we go forward.
Great, thank you. And Tina said she's talking to Orange Umbrella about making their assets more inclusive. So I think you mentioned that. I suppose that's key, isn't it? To anything that we're doing, we need to make sure it's accessible and inclusive.
Absolutely, absolutely, and understanding what is the barrier, because we generally know that there are some barriers, but we don't know specifically what would ease those barriers and how that will become easier. So any information you have, let me know, and it needs to be passed on as part of our assessment of needs, because even though I know what we need, it needs to be actually part of the formal documentation.
Okay, great. So and Tina's also said communities of identity want support from people like them. Stigma is a huge barrier and discrimination. And she's then just put language too. You might as well just say all this, Tina. I feel like I'm speaking for you.
All right, you said it all now. That was everything.
So Tina, is if I want to explore that further, is a suggestion that it'll be good for us to have an LGBTQ DA worker in Stockport?
Possibly. I mean, I don't know what the figures are specifically for Stockport, and I don't think even the national research that the LGBT Foundation have done is specific.
Gallup is the nearest one to a national data, but yeah, you're right. It's not very, because people don't come forward to report it. Yeah,
but I mean that's sort of where I get my figures from, is their hidden figures report that they did early last year, and it's levels of abuse are above the national average, and then add on to that being transgender, being from an ethnic diverse background, being disabled. It just, each level that you add just makes it worse and worse. And within that, there's we've got infighting within the LGBTQ community. There's so much racism and transphobia, and it's just just don't know where to start, really.
And I think you made a point, Tina, didn't you, that as Sector 3 are doing some of this mapping stuff, it would make sense to really make sure that's connected to.
Absolutely.
I think so. I've actually given your name and Abba's name based on the work that you were doing as part of Sector 3 to Diana Turner, which is the person that's doing our mapping for us, to kind of really incorporate your views and your thoughts on that. If anybody else wants to be contacted by Diana, please let me know, email me, and she'll really capture the voice of your client group within that area and reflect it in our strategy. Because I can't emphasize enough, even though I know all the needs, it needs to really be coming from you, because if I say it could be contested. But if it's coming from you, it's directly coming from you.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, Nicola won't mind me saying that you should probably connect with Nicola, Naz, because I know in your presentation it said a lot of stuff about really being able to engage with communities and figure out what they want, and Nicola does a lot of community organising and facilitating, don't you, Nicola? So that might be a good local asset to tap into.
I would love to do that, Nicola. If you give me your email, I'll be happy to email you. I'd love to do that. Something that was really interesting, I mean, I'm sure Claire wouldn't be really happy about it because she's feeling the pressure. But as soon as we started to create local community-based services. Claire's referral is more than our statutory commission services now, because people prefer to engage with people in the community, and that's the truth, that's the reality. So I feel it's really important to invest in communities and respond to what they need the way they need it.
Brilliant. And a few comments rather than questions. Sam from PIP has said, really interesting to understand more around this. No service users for us have presented as needing support with DA, but helpful to understand. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's good for us all to know a bit more. And Abba's kind of said that doesn't mean we can't raise awareness when we have the opportunity. And Hazel from Age UK, we've had an increase in clients needing support with DV at Win at Home. Or while at home, I'm not sure if that's Win.
No, it's Win at Home. It's our service, Win at Home, so we do 18+. So it's really about someone's home environment. We've had more referrals come through lately with people with domestic violence. We've noticed an increase. So it doesn't always have to be an older person, it can be younger people. We support quite a lot of people. So we go in and support people with self-neglect, or people who've had to move home because of domestic violence or situations. So we'll go in and support people with like actually practical things, you know, getting things like toast, people have no washer, no something, have a cooker, we can support with stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's really interesting for me to know, because I always assumed that your services with older people.
No, so well, we do some commission services by Stockport Council for 18+, and we run the Win at Home service.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks.
And interestingly, Naz, because I was dealing with the chat and dealing with letting people in and making sure your picture was in the right place, I don't know if I missed this, but a lot of the stuff that we're talking about seems to be quite as once the domestic abuse has happened. Is there much work, or are you interested in the preventative stuff around?
So what we need to do, even though there is a part of our funding which is about, you know, after the crisis, we also were lucky enough to be given a third-year pot of money from the Home Office, which the focus of that is on prevention. So we are actually thinking in terms of prevention. There is a window almost, like people know something is happening and it's not right, but it hasn't escalated to a level where they understand, you know, what is happening. This is an area that we're going to focus on. We are doing work with schools. We are doing some work in terms of changing messages and communicating messages in the community, but there's something specific we do, and I've noticed is a question from Abba is just right in front of me with Michelle from college. I wrote a training program for college to be taught to students who are learning to give haircuts. That's because few victims who were murdered shared their DA experience with their stylist a day or two before they were killed by the partners. So after we've done that, we actually thought that it's really important for us to develop that training to be for anybody that's getting trained for any kind of trade, for builders, for leisure sector, for anybody that's doing any kind of training. Something that was interesting, the anecdotal feedback we had from students who participated in that training was that they felt really comfortable to talk about it in the community. They felt really aware of what's happening in them. They did fundraising and awareness raising in the community. So that's an area that we really weren't anticipating to be an outcome, but it was. So again, if anybody wants us to deliver any training, we have first conversations training, which is about, you know, how do you talk to someone and explore with them if they're experienced domestic abuse. I'll be more than happy to deliver that training, and it doesn't have to be big, small. I'm completely flexible. Just let me know. I'll be happy to share those training with you. It's just about making you feel more confident about how do you approach someone to explore with them in a safe way if they're experiencing domestic abuse. But prevention is quite important, and you know, we know this, but we learn it over and over. which is quite a lot of people know something isn't right, but they don't necessarily want to put the title or label of domestic abuse on it.
Great, thank you. Is there any more questions for Naz while we've got her? There's a few people interested in the training, so they should email me for that now.
Please email me. We already have a training which is about first conversations, and I'll be happy to deliver that training. We have another training which happens periodically, which is a bit more advanced. It kind of talks to you about the legal definition of domestic abuse, but also how to do a risk assessment for somebody who is disclosing domestic abuse. Both of them are for free. You can access them however you want to. If the program that we run it on regular basis doesn't match with, you know, your group, let me know, and I talk to the facilitator so we can provide something specific for you. And then we have quite an advanced set of trainings as well, which is delivering interventions for people who experience coercive control, because that needs a trauma-informed approach. It needs soothing, grounding, different type of work. So just contact me. I'll be happy to listen to what issues you're experiencing and write something that meets your need.
And maybe if there's not enough people in one organisation to put the training on, we could do it as a across the sector.
Whatever works. I'm very flexible around that. I want it to work for us, so it really doesn't matter. Whatever works, just let me know.
Great, thank you for that. Any more for any more?
I just want to say, like, it's really good that now there's this emphasis on prevention, because, you know, since I've been working in Stockport in the last couple of years, and, you know, I've been aware of like the Hate Crime Partnership and Stop Hate UK, which are amazing, but I've always said that's, you know, it's the abuse equivalent of dealing with abortion. It's like, you know, don't put all the effort into the end result. Like, you've got to go way back, and education is exactly where it starts. So it's really good to see that.
It is absolutely right. And, you know, I was, even though I knew it, but I was really shocked to hear from young people in schools when they were saying, well, if my boyfriend or girlfriend don't tell me what to wear or doesn't stop me from talking to other people, they don't love me. You know, it's really heartbreaking to see people measure being loved and cared for by being controlled, and the level of lack of boundaries in terms of sharing social media passwords, that type of thing. You know, it was really, and it's a really difficult subject to work with young people when it comes around that. So educating young people is really important, but also prevention work, educating public is also really important, because again, in a couple of homicides, we had people said we knew something wasn't right, but we didn't know it's domestic abuse. So yeah, it's all really important.
I think, and also including maybe people like the Maternity Voices Partnership, because I don't think people realise that, you know, abuse doesn't start like, you know, with, say, child abuse, for instance. It doesn't start with a child. It starts when that child is in the mother's stomach, and when that mother experiences abuse, both the mother and the fetus produce cortisol, which will then flood its brain and affect its brain development. And it's, you know, women are just so crucial to this.
That's again another one of trainings I deliver, relational trauma, which it looks into that. It looks into right from pregnancy, the impact of that, and later on attachment, children forming friendship. You know, it's kind of, it really works through generations. So yeah, you're right, it's really important.
Abba, did you have your hand up? You're on mute, love.
Yeah, sorry about that. I did. Yeah, it's been touched upon, but while I'm on, Naz, great presentation. I just wanted to just really clarify what I meant on the chat when I said, you know, we still have an opportunity, even though we might not know where people are. And I think it's what Tina was talking about when she was talking about the LGBTQ plus communities, because I think even though we don't know where people are, and lots of the time we don't, where majority of the people are, and I think even if we start with the one, it's better, because I think that one person might share knowledge with another, and so on and so on.
Absolutely.
And I think we don't really need to wait for where to find people or what, you know.
I think actually you as a sector are in the right place to hold enough voices and enough feedback of people in the community to start from somewhere. And I agree with you, we don't need to know every single person and where they're at. I think as we have a good starting point to know, you know, there are 5 people that we're in touch with and we know what they need, and let's start from there. I completely agree with you on that. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to stop the recording now, if that's